And welcome back to the Financially Simple Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Goodbrand, and we're still dealing with investments. We're talking about personal finances for us business owners. As I mentioned last episode, we've just started into Investing 101. This is a series of dialogues that I have typically with some of our new clients that come in. If they really have never dealt with investing, I'll go over these basic parameters on how investing works. So last time we talked about asset types, we talked about stocks, bonds, cash. Today we're going to deal with risk tolerance and investment horizon. What exactly is risk tolerance and investment horizon? Now, I got to warn you, if you're joining with us on YouTube, you're seeing me in this same blue shirt. Yep, I'm wearing the same blue shirt I have been for the last 2 episodes. Dude, do you ever change your clothes? Yeah, you see, I'm recording like 6 episodes back to back to back. I'm going to be traveling for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and I wanted to get you this information. So if you're looking on YouTube, I actually do change my clothes. It's okay. If you're like, dude, what are you talking about? Check us out on youtube.com. Underneath Financially Simple. There's tons of videos there, things that have never, ever hit this podcast. I often deal with specific questions that come up from clients, or more importantly, prospective clients who call us and say, hey, I need help. So check it out on youtube.com. By the way, when you're there, if you see something that I need to record, you say, man, you've never talked about this, shoot me a message. Reach out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever, and let me know what we need to do. So let's deal with risk tolerance and investment horizon. You perhaps have heard the term risk tolerance. What in the world does it mean? I got to tell you, risk tolerance is one of those things that the industry, the financial industry, has done a better job of in recent years. Fintech, or the financial technology front, it seems like it's like dog years for us. In 1 year, we are seeing 7 years of progress. It's crazy how much technology is coming into my world. Whenever I first entered the industry almost 18 years ago, really almost 18 years ago now, we would do a risk assessment through a sheet of paper that would ask questions. Questions about, have you ever invested in the stock market? How long do you plan investing for? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we learned through 2007, 8, and 9 was many people did not understand risk tolerance. Even though we had risk profiles in place and we were trying to do our best job to make sure the client's portfolio matched what their objectives were, people did not have a clear understanding of how risk tolerance directly related to the movement of the portfolio. Now, in 2007, 8, 9, guys, it was a bloodbath. You remember the pictures of Wall Street people jumping out of windows. It just was unbearable, especially in the spring of 09. The market kind of bottomed out in March, I think it was, of 09, but it was brutal. In fact, I can remember sitting in the office looking at the Dow Jones Industrial Average at hitting 11, 12, 13, and then all of a sudden falling significantly down into the 6s. I mean, just it seemed like yesterday. I can remember people saying, man, sell my account, sell, get out of the market. It's going to go to zero. Those who were smart started buying. Warren Buffett's quote, which we have here in our conference room, it says, when others are greedy, be fearful. When others are fearful, be greedy. I love that quote. I just butchered it. I think it's a little opposite of that, but that's the assessment of it. So when we get to a risk tolerance profile, we're trying to figure out what your emotional makeup is, how we can invest the money so that you do not hurt yourself in good markets or bad markets. You're like, Justin, you can hurt yourself in good markets? Actually, you can. You can become more aggressive. You can have chase the dragon scenario come into place where you see something cool and fiery and you want to just travel down that road. That can be dangerous. We saw that a couple of years ago with the cryptocurrencies and how cryptocurrencies shot way up, just stupid crazy. Everybody's like, man, I can't believe you're not investing in crypto. Can't believe. And then it crashed, so to speak. We've seen that in the real estate market. I'm seeing people who've never bought real estate before go out and borrow monies for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 pieces of property that they're not going to live in, and they're living in a $200,000 house in East Tennessee and around the Southeast. Obviously, in California, you folks are like, dude, I'm listening to your thing, like $200,000. Yeah, you can't even buy a bedroom out here. I get that. But over here, that's a big deal. They're spending stupid amounts of money right now, and the real estate market is going crazy. Nashville, Tennessee is one of the fastest growing real estate markets in our country right now. I've watched real estate markets go out the roof. What does all that have to do with risk tolerance? Risk tolerance is simply trying to assess how you're going to react in negative or positive marketplaces, and then to build a investment account or investment portfolio. An investment portfolio, by the way, could be real estate and business and other things, but we're trying to build an investment portfolio so that when the market reacts negatively, severely, or positively, that you don't hurt yourself. Now, in our office, we use a program that scores the risk for every client. We use this for every client before we can ever invest their money, before we can ever even do their financial plan. We got to know what their risk level is. And it walks through a funnel scenario. Basically, it's going to assign a risk number between the number of 0 or 1 to 99. 1 being conservative, like, yeah, don't let me lose any money, throw it in, like buried underneath the house, conservative, to 99 being, I want to roll the dice. I want to go to Vegas, roll the dice. I really believe that I have a 50% chance of winning on black, so let's just put it on black until I win and make my money. There's a great number of numbers, obviously, between 1 and 99. There's all sorts of different types of risk. And as somebody would invest at a risk level of a 20, would be totally different than somebody investing at a risk level of a 60 or 80 or 40 for that matter. It's not uncommon whenever we begin doing these risk assessments for clients and we're looking at their IRAs and their non-qualified accounts like we talked about a few episodes ago, and their 401ks, and we start analyzing how they invest their money. We start comparing their current real estate holdings. Yes, we can run a risk assessment for them as well. We start analyzing their entire portfolio. It's not uncommon for a client who has a score maybe of 64 to realize they're only investing at a 39. We actually had that happen with a young client. It made me so mad. This client, very educated medical professional, they're an entrepreneur, a doctor. This particular one's a dentist that we're working with, just brought on as a new client. We did a risk assessment on their portfolio. I'm talking about this individual was in the mid-30s. By all means, they scored an 88. That's pretty stinking aggressive, folks. Like, look, I want to pour it in there. I've got many years ago. I'm not worried about the markets. I'm not looking at my account statements. Just make me some money. That type of aggressive. And their advisor had them invested at a risk score of 39. Folks, I have 70-year-old clients who have risk scores greater than 39. And yet this individual, through the last 5 years of their life, because of very poor, I'd almost say piss poor, if I could, I guess I just did, piss poor advice. By the way, that's an old Southern term. It means worse than poor, okay? Through very poor advice from an advisor who was only interested in selling them something, ended up hurting this individual's life, financial life, because they lost the power of compound interest over the last 5 unbelievable years of the stock market. So it's not uncommon for me to see individuals come in with a risk score of 64 when they go through an assessment. And all of a sudden, they end up with, they should have been at a 39, or I've seen individuals score 64 whenever their portfolio is at an 88 or a 90 risk score. The opposite. The advisor has not been managing their investments. They've been buying in through their 401k at work, and now all of a sudden their total portfolio is way out of whack. Much more risk than they ever intended it to have. If that individual, if the individual is invested below their risk score, they're probably going to be ticked if the market's going up and they're not. Okay, candidly. And that market's going to be whatever market you want to talk about. When I use the term market in the episodes, I'm not talking about one particular index. I'm talking about the overall equity or bond market or whatever market you want to track. But if their market of their choice is going up and they're not, the person who's invested beneath their risk score is pretty frustrated. Let me tell you, if somebody is invested well above their risk score and the market drops, and they drop significantly greater than the market, they're downright ticked. Like filing complaint ticked. Okay? You do not want to have a client that scores a mediocre, middle of the road, let's say mediocre, middle of the road risk score of a 40, 50, 60 and have them in an 80 or a 90 risk tolerance model. Back in 07, 08, 09, an 80 or 90 would have lost 50 or 60 or 70% in value. Imagine grandma, which I've seen, by the way, from big firms who have grandma's little bit of money and grandma becomes a number. They become a number at these big wirehouses, so to speak, or these big national firms. And all of a sudden, grandma's account is way, way out of whack from where grandma never intended it to be. So when you're looking at risk score, one of the things you have to nail down is what is your score? But here's where it gets kind of tricky. Many times I'll have people say, hey, Justin, look, I am 50 years old or I'm 60 years old. Shouldn't I be more conservative today in my investing than I was 10, 15, 20 years ago? Now, if you're looking at the risk tolerance, you have to translate are we talking about your tolerance, your emotional makeup, or your capacity makeup? So there's a thing called risk capacity versus risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is a feature that involves risk capacity, okay? Risk capacity is basically going to identify the risk you can afford to take. So many times people will mess up those two. And by the way, even professionals, and this is where I get frustrated because people, they go and work out they go and use their son. Nothing wrong. No, appreciate your mom and dad trusted me when I didn't know anything. But they go and work with some novice out there and they don't know the difference between capacity and tolerance. Tolerance may be that, look, I'm okay rolling the dice. I'm okay investing at a 78 and 90. But my capacity may say I can't invest at a 70, 80, 90. If I do, I have the potential to have a major drop in the market and never recover to substantiate my income that I need. Or it could be the opposite. It could be that your risk score personally is very low, but you have the capacity because you have way more money than you ever will need to invest more aggressively. It's amazing to see the difference between capacity and tolerance in the marketplace. As an advisor, and whenever our CFPs are dealing with risk capacity versus risk tolerance, the key there is to make sure not only are you looking at the scoring of that individual's personal makeup and how they're going to react in the negative marketplace, but you also have to look at their goals. One of our highest net worth clients has a very large portfolio that we manage here internally. He has a risk tolerance in that 70 range. So out of 0 to 100, he's scoring about a 70. His wife's at about a 60. But even if the market took a major dive, they're still at half their value of their portfolio are never going to be able to spend their money. So they have a greater risk capacity than they do their tolerance level. And as such, what we've taught them how to do is set aside some of that money that they're earmarking for their grandkids and their great-grandkids now. And we are investing that portion of money, which is way outside their tolerance level, but it's within their capacity level. We're investing it as if it's their grandkids or their kids' money now. So knowing how capacity, tolerance, and all this works together is very vital. And you're like, dude, okay, you lost me. Okay, here's the deal. If you look at the show notes, go on your iTunes account, go on your Stitcher account, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever program you're listening to this on, go on the account, and I'm going to have our producer put a link in this particular show notes in the account that allow you to do a free risk assessment. You can put in your numbers there. You can say, look, I have a portfolio that's worth $100,000, $200,000, $5, whatever. And you can go through the risk assessment. It'll tell you roughly what your risk score is. And if you want us to, we'll reach out to you and say, hey, I received your risk assessment. Would you like for us to chat with you about it? So we're going to put a link there. We're also going to put a link on the blog post, which corresponds with this particular show. So at financiallysimple.com, if you want to look at the show notes for this particular episode and the details and some of the other things there, we're actually going to have a button there on the blog post that you can click on your risk tolerance and actually get a real, true risk tolerance. That's judging your emotional control. So check it out. Both in the show notes. Hey, by the way, while you're on iTunes or Stitcher, Spotify, checking out your risk tolerance and you're making sure that your portfolio is invested right for you, do me a favor. Would you leave me a review? We're getting a fair amount of reviews. I have this challenge before year end to be number one in a few categories. And the only way I can do that is to have some really cool reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're hosting, especially if you're on iTunes like so many people are. Go ahead and just reach over and just leave a subscribe button and leave a review for us. And just that'll help me. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. All right. So let's move on. Not only do you have risk tolerance and risk capacity, whenever you're dealing with investments, we also have to analyze our investment horizon. Investment horizon. Not too long ago, I jumped out of an airplane. Yes, yours truly jumped out of an airplane. It was pretty amazing. In fact, I think they're going to share that on the Financially Simple social media pages. It may even be on YouTube already. I have no idea. But it was pretty awesome. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I would do it again today. You're like, Justin, you've lost it. Yeah, maybe so. Whenever we were flying that airplane, my cousin, who is a commercial pilot, been so for many, many, many years, was talking about how they go and land the planes and everything. And what they do is they don't come straight into the airport from like 10,000 foot or 14,000 foot, which is where we jumped out, by the way. It's like 2 miles high. We don't jump from we don't take the airplane from 14,000 foot to ground zero in a matter of seconds. Nor do you climb that fast. No, what you do is you circle and you're slowly bringing your airplane down to runway in a smooth manner. You don't want to crash the stupid thing, right? Investment horizon is thinking very similar to that. There's three types of investment horizons that we deal with. A short-term investment horizon would be where somebody's going to invest money for a very short period of time. Maybe you want to buy a rental house in 4 or 5 years. Maybe you want to buy a new tractor. I know you do. By the way, if you do it, you might want to visit some Kubota dealerships. I'm really liking my Kubota. Love it to death. But maybe you want to buy a new tractor, and you want to buy it in about 5 or 6 years. Maybe it's 2 or 3 years, whatever that number is. I typically will call short-term investing as within a 3-year period. You would actually build a portfolio specifically to reach that particular goal. Now look, if you're trying to invest for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, you're not going to go out and throw your money into international positions or stocks for that matter. You're going to use more protected or safer, lower risk type investments. So a short-term time horizon, even though you can have a high risk tolerance and say, man, I want to cruise along the interstate like at 90 miles an hour, my risk score is 90, you may have a pile of money here that has a very short time horizon on it. So from 0 to 3 years. So you want to put a portion of your money in maybe cash, or maybe it's a high yield money market account, or maybe it's a treasury, or maybe it's a dividend producing stock. That's probably not a good idea, but I've seen people want to do that for a short-term investment. So short-term might be 3 years. Again, time horizon and risk tolerance go hand in hand. The second type of time horizon investment horizon is the medium term or the mid-level horizon. Typically, this is going to fall between about 3 to 10 years. Okay. The stock market, as a general rule of thumb, goes down about once every 4 to 5 years. So if you hold your finger up like I'm doing on the YouTube channel, about once every 4 to 5 years, the stock market falls in value. In fact, I just looked at the camera. I got my little filter up here popping some noise back, and it's pretty cool. You probably see it on the screen here. We're hammering down the noise in the booth here. But the stock market falls traditionally about every 3 to 4 years. Out of every 4 or 5 years, you have one negative year. Well, in a medium-term horizon, you're not trying to come in like a glider on that runway. You realize you've got a couple of years, and so you don't have to cut your throttle so fast on that airplane landing on the runway. You can invest it a little bit more aggressively, you see? And so that's where probably a good portfolio is going to have some stocks and bonds in it. Bonds being a little bit more risk adverse than stocks. Depends on the market conditions, but it may be a little bit more risk averse than stocks. So you're going to include a little bit of stocks and bonds there in that middle term investment horizon. Again, I don't care if your risk capacity or your risk tolerance is over here pegging out the meter on the most aggressive. If you have some intermediate goals, depending on the value and the size of your estate, you may need to invest a little bit beneath or a lot beneath your risk capacity or your risk tolerance level for this particular goal that you set forth. And finally, the last one is long-term horizons. Obviously, retirement for me is a little ways out. I don't see myself retiring tomorrow, or for that matter, in the next 5 or 10 years. Miss Emily's already said I can't. Now, I think it could happen in the next 10 to 20 years, okay? But the next 5 to 10, I don't think she's going to let me retire. She says I can't come home until Jude's out of the house, and that's another 10, 12 years now before he's off to college and through college. So in that case, that portion of money that I'm denoting for my goals for my long term, it can be more aggressive. I can bounce it like a basketball. I am not dropping my cruising altitude on my airplane down to land on the runway quite yet, so I can still hammer down and push that 747 at whatever, 500-600 miles an hour. I don't have to worry about dropping the speed and dropping my altitude down. So when you're looking at the risk of a portfolio, we have to deal with a couple of things. We have to deal with risk tolerance and time horizons, as your majorities. Now, we also will get into financial planning concepts where we talk about the value of the estate, how it's positioned, all those things, which do factor in how you invest. But for today, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it financially simple and realize that risk tolerance is how we're going to emotionally handle the ups and downs of the market. Risk capacity is how much room we have within our emotional makeup or how much we're willing to take. But even though we're willing to take more risk, we may not be wise to do so. So we have to look at our investment time horizon. Are we investing the money for the short, the mid, or the long-term goals? I hope that helps you on this particular episode. Hey, like I mentioned earlier, check it out on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and do me a favor and leave us a review. That helps other business owners get the message. We're seeing some good spike there, and I'd like to get even more people to check out the Financially Simple podcast. As I always say, life is hard. It's good, but man, it can be frustrating. Trying to figure out risk tolerance and time horizons, it doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all go out and make it a great day.